Hi, I'm Shuichi Murakami. Welcome to the Designing Landscape Form series. The theme of this episode is Let's compose spaces of columns and canopies with trees. In the previous episode, we learned that trees as assemblage of lines possesses transparency, which is the essential morphological nature. In this episode, we will explore fundamental methods for composing space with trees, drawing inspiration from the work of Dan Kiley, one of the foremost landscape architects of the 20th century. Some of you may have been deeply impressed by magnificent architecture, where a beautifully ordered array of columns supports a graceful canopy above. In a similar way, through the natural process of branching, trees can also create spatial compositions of columns and canopies within the landscape. As we learned in the previous episode, the form of a tree is an accumulation of its branches. The very first branch continues to elongate and thicken over time, eventually developing into the trunk, while later branches become finer, intertwine, and spread outward to form the crown, thus shaping the characteristic figure of a tall tree like these. When viewed as a spatial elements, the trunk becomes column and the crown a canopy. When tall trees are arranged at regular intervals across a surface, the orderly alignment of these columns creates space in which a delicate and finely textured canopy is gracefully supported above. Let us imagine what happens within a space shaped by the tree's columns and canopy. For example, the leaves and branches sway in the wind, creating faint rustling sounds. Sunlight filters through the gaps between the leaves, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow onto the ground. Sitting at the base of a tree to read a book, walking between the trunks, or leaning against one to rest, people find their own places within this space. Dan Kiley, one of the leading landscape architects of the 20th century, designed numerous spaces for columns and spaces with trees. The reason he created so many of these spatial compositions can be understood from Kiley's own words as follows. You squeeze in between the trunks, and it's always moving and changing spatially. It's dynamic. This is a thing that intrigued and excited me right from the beginning. What I've been trying to do in my work is create a man-made scene having those attributes and characteristics. Now let us look at a schematic plan diagram that illustrates Kylie's spaces of columns and canopies with trees, an approach he used to embody the dynamic sensation of moving through a grove. Here is how to read the diagram in a plan view. The central dot represents the trunk of a tall tree, that is the column, and the surrounding circle represents the crown, that is the canopy. Kylie's works exhibit several patterns of tall tree arrangement: linear row, grade, enclosure, hybrid composition, and irregular layout. Let us now take a look at each of these patterns. First is the linear arrangement in which tall trees are placed in a single row at regular intervals. In some cases, the spacing is so tight that the canopy nearly touches the adjacent column. Sometimes two rows are aligned to create a corridor-like space, and the spacing between the two rows may also be quite narrow. Kiley also designed compositions with 3 rows. In these cases, the spacing across the rows is tighter than the spacing along them, creating a stronger sense of corridor across the short direction, while movement along the long direction becomes an experience of passing through successive layers of columns. Kiley's works demonstrates that even within what appears to be simple linear arrangement, there are numerous possible variations. Next is a grid arrangement, in which tall trees are placed across a surface at regular intervals. In some cases, the spacing is so tight that the canopy nearly touches the adjacent column. At times, 4 neighboring trees are grouped by narrowing their spacing to form a set, while the distance between sets is made wider. This creates the impression of 4 tree spatial units dispersed within a larger field of columns and canopy. Furthermore, the grid is not always orthogonal. Kiley also employed diagonal grids in some of his works. This shows an enclosure arrangement in which tall trees are placed along a rectangular outline. In some cases, the enclosure is formed with 2 rows. There are also compositions in which tall trees are arranged along a circular outline, sometimes using 2 rows as well. In addition, some compositions combine these different patterns. On this slide, you can see a hybrid of a linear row and 2 grids. On the next one, you see a hybrid of linear rows with 3 enclosures. In addition to the regular patterns we have seen so far, there are also arrangements like this one, where the trees are placed irregularly, compared with situations where the columns are aligned in an orderly manner. Such layouts may evoke a stronger sense of dynamism. The density of the canopy also becomes more varied, creating a wider range of spatial experience. The spaces of columns and canopies with trees introduced today are drawn from the Kiley's works listed here. They range from private gardens to public spaces, encompassing a wide variety of site types. For those interested in Dan Kiley, I recommend this book. Today, we explore the fundamental principles of spatial composition of columns and canopies with trees through the work of Dan Kiley. At first glance, a space composed only of columns and canopies may appear simple, yet Kiley's lifelong pursuit of this idea reveals the rich depth and vast potential of tree arrangement. Here we examine these works only through plan drawings, but by viewing them three-dimensionally. Through axonometric drawings, physical models, or computer-generated image, our understanding would deepen even further. In the next episode, we will turn our attention to the shadows cast by trees. Through the practice of the renowned landscape architect James Rose, we will explore the forms and movements of shadows created by branches and leaves and ever-changing expressions of light and shadow over time. See you in the next episode.